All right, so ancient China. Everyone always wants to know how power worked way back then.
Yeah, it gets complicated.
It wasn't just like who had the biggest army.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's way more interesting than that.
Our source for this deep dive is this paper called, get this, The Legitimacy of Power from Neolithic to Imperial China.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It really gets into, like, how did these leaders convince everyone that they were the ones in charge?
Not just in charge, but like they had the right to be.
Yeah. The right to rule.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really cool. Think like divine mandates from heaven, all these super fancy rituals.
Ooh, I love a good ritual.
Oh, yeah, they're the best. And strategic family ties.
Like arranged marriages and stuff.
Yeah, totally. It's giving very much Game of Thrones, Ancient China edition.
I'm here for it.
So I think it's super fascinating how these ancient societies really figured out how to build systems of power that didn't only rely on brute force.
Right, because you can't just, like, force everyone to do what you want all the time.
Not sustainably anyway, right? They needed ways to make their rules seem legit, like to really convince people that they deserve to be in charge.
So how did they do that?
Well, this is where this idea of heaven's mandate comes in.
Okay, heaven's mandate. That sounds pretty serious.
Oh, it was huge. You weren't just in power because you were born into the right family.
So it's not just like a king passing down the crown to his son.
No, not necessarily. It was way more like spiritual. The leader was divinely chosen to rule.
Chosen by heaven.
Yeah, chosen by heaven. So it wasn't just about bloodlines or anything like that. It was about proving that you were worthy.
Worthy in, like, heaven's eyes.
Exactly, you got it. And this mandate, this heaven's mandate, is what gave the leader the authority to rule.
Makes sense. But, like, it wasn't a free pass, right?
Oh, no, not at all. It also came with a lot of responsibility.
So if the leader was doing a good job, everything was going well, people were happy, like, that meant heaven was happy too, right?
Right. But things didn't always go well, did they?
Well, no, I mean, droughts happen, famines, floods, things happen.
Exactly. And according to the ancient Chinese, all those bad things, those calamities, were a sign that heaven was not happy with the ruler.
Oh, no. Like they were messing up.
Yeah, basically. And this is where those rituals that we were talking about before become really important. Now, they weren't just for show. They were a way to show heaven, A&D, the people,
Yeah.
that the leader was still worthy.
Okay, so it was like a giant PR campaign.
You could say that, a really elaborate PR campaign to try and appease heaven and keep the people on their side.
Interesting. So what kinds of rituals are we talking about here?
The paper gives some really cool examples, like they would do all these sacrifices to honor the royal ancestors. It was a way of linking the current leader's power to all those powerful people who came before.
It's like saying, look, I come from a long line of awesome leaders. The ancestors approve of me.
Yeah, and they're on my side. Exactly.
Smart move. But it wasn't all about looking back to the past, right? I noticed they also did rain ceremonies, like to try and make it rain if there was a drought.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They weren't just sitting around hoping for the best.
And exorcisms?
Yeah, those two.
Yeah.
Those were all about showing that the leader had the power to actually influence the natural world.
It's like, look, I can control the weather. I can get rid of evil spirits. I'm clearly the right person for this job.
Exactly. They couldn't just say they were powerful. They had to prove it. They had to be proactive and show the people they could protect them.
So the leader had to be a good politician, a showman, and like a spiritual leader all at the same time.
It's like the ultimate multitasker.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And it wasn't just rituals and mandates. There's another piece to this power puzzle, and that's, it's bronze.
Bronze, like the metal. What does bronze have to do with power?
Oh, it was way more than just some shiny metal. See, bronze was pretty scarce back then, so it was automatically valuable.
Okay, so that makes sense. Like, if it's rare, it's going to be worth more.
Right. And they used it for, like, everything important, weapons, of course, for, fighting wars and stuff. But also, and this is key, for all those religious objects.
So the leader was controlling the stuff used to, like, talk to the gods?
Yeah. So it was like the leader was showing they had control over the physical world, the resources, and the spiritual realm.
Powerful combo.
Super powerful. It's like, imagine if someone today controlled all the oil, right?
Whoa. Okay, yeah, that would be a big deal.
Yeah, you'd have economic power, military power, and D, you could shape people's beliefs about the world.
Right. It's not just the oil, it's everything that comes with it.
Exactly. It's all connected.
And you know what else is interesting? The paper talks about how there was like this two-tiered system for producing bronze.
Oh, yeah, that's super fascinating.
You had these centralized royal workshops that would make the fancy ritual objects for the leader.
The good stuff.
Yeah, the top tier stuff. But then they had like all these decentralized workshops all over the place that were making everyday bronze objects for, regular people.
The more practical things.
Right, tools and weapons and all that.
And I think that's super interesting because you see this hierarchy even within the production of bronze itself.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like the leader is at the top, controlling the most valuable resource, but also the most valuable way of producing it.
Exactly. It's like another way of solidifying their position at the top.
It's like having the best chefs in the kingdom making food only for you.
Exactly. And everyone else is kind of, making do.
It's all about sending a message.
Oh,
Okay, so we've got Heaven's Mandate, we've got rituals, we've got bronze, but you know what we haven't talked about yet?
let me. What could it be?
Family.
Ah, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Family. Can't forget about family.
Like, that's a power move even today.
You're telling me.
Dynasties, inheritance, all that, it's huge.
Oh, yeah. Family, or kinship as it's often called in the academic world, was absolutely crucial for holding on to power in ancient China.
Makes sense, especially in such a huge empire.
Right, so diverse, so many different groups of people, you really needed a solid base to work from. Family provided that stability and helped to, avoid the whole empire just like breaking apart.
Like everyone fighting over who gets to be in charge.
Exactly. But the way that power was passed down within a family wasn't always simple.
Oh, tell me more. I thought it was always just like from father to son next in line.
During the Shang dynasty, which was, one of the earliest ones, sometimes the throne would pass between brothers.
So like keeping in the same generation.
Yeah. So the father to son thing, that became more of a thing later on.
Interesting.
But even then, the idea of family, or jia, which is the word they used, it wasn't just about, like, who's related to who.
So it was more than just sharing the same blood.
Way more. It had this deep, like, moral significance. Each member of the family had a specific role to play. They had to maintain harmony and keep things running smoothly.
So it was a system, not just a random group of people.
Yeah, it's woven into the whole fabric of how power worked.
Okay, so family's powerful. It's connected to morals and how society functions. But things couldn't have always been smooth sailing, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Let's not romanticize things too much here.
Like families argue, they fight, they have drama.
Got it.
And all that must have spilled over into politics sometimes.
Oh, for sure. Imagine this. You're a ruler and you marry off your daughter to a powerful lord, right? To like make an alliance.
Smart move, keeps everyone happy.
Yeah, in theory.
Yeah.
But now imagine that lord's minister straight up murders your daughter.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, dark stuff. But it happened.
Wait.
Really? Really. It happened to a guy called the Chief of Lu. And that murder, it triggered this huge political crisis.
I bet.
It shows you that family ties, as powerful as they were, they couldn't prevent conflict. Sometimes they were actually the cause-e of the conflict.
Family can be messy.
Can be. It could be your greatest strength or your biggest weakness. So even though these alliances were super important, they were also risky.
Talk about walking a tightrope.
Yeah, and those marriage alliances, they get even juicier, believe me.
Ooh, okay, now I need to hear more. Tell me everything.
Buckle up, because we're about to go deep into the world of ancient Chinese marriage politics. It's a wild ride.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with it. All right, so ancient Chinese marriage politics. It's like, who needs a dating app when you can just marry your way to the top?
Right. It's like a high-stakes game of chess, but with, like, way fancier outfits.
Tell me more. Like,
Yeah.
how did these marriage alliances actually affect who was in power and who wasn't?
Okay, so imagine this. You're a powerful noble, and you manage to marry your daughter to the emperor himself.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
It's not just a wedding.
Yeah.
Right? It's basically a major power move.
Oh, I see. You're like instantly connected to the most powerful guy in the empire.
Exactly. You've got influence in the court. You're in the loop on all the important decisions. It's kind of like lobbying today, but with way more silk robes and fancy ceremonies.
Okay, so not just about love then, it's more about solidifying your family's position, right? Like keeping the power within a specific family line.
You got it. And this created like this whole web of interconnected families all trying to outmaneuver each other. It's kind of like a giant soap opera, but with real political consequence.
Oh, I bet there was some serious drama. So we've got this tension, right? The emperor wants all the power, but these families are pulling strings behind the scenes. Did any of them ever try to just, like, overthrow the emperor and take the throne for themselves?
Oh, absolutely. Rebellions and power struggles, that's like the bread and butter of ancient Chinese history. The emperor couldn't just rule by force. He needed the support of these powerful families, or at least, like, their begrudging cooperation.
Yeah, I guess if they all teamed up against him, he'd be in trouble.
Big trouble. Their loyalty, their resources, their armies, all of that was essential for keeping the empire stable.
It's like this constant balancing act. Keep those families happy, but not so happy that they think they can take over. How did they manage that?
It was a tricky game, for sure. Think of it as a system of rewards and punishments. If a family was loyal, they got rewarded with land, titles, fancy positions in the government.
Okay, so that's the carrot. What about the stick?
Well, let's just say that crossing the emperor was not a good career move. You
Right.
definitely didn't want to end up on his bad side.
Makes sense. But rewards and punishments, that's just one part of it, right? Did the emperors use anything else to, like, keep those families in check? What about all those elaborate court rituals we were talking about before?
Oh, those were a huge part of it. They weren't just about religious piety. They were carefully designed to reinforce the emperor's authority.
I see. It's all about the spectacle.
Yeah. Like, think about it. The emperor's got these super lavish robes. He's living in these majestic palaces and all those court ceremonies. They're incredibly complex and choreographed with tons of symbolism.
It's like they're saying, look at us. We're so powerful and important. Don't even think about messing with it.
Exactly. It's all about creating this aura of power and majesty, this like untouchable aura, reminding everyone who's really in charge.
But it wasn't just about outward appearances, right? I mean, the emperor had to actually be a good ruler.
Right, yeah, for sure. He couldn't just look the part. He had to ACT the part too. He was expected to be like the moral example for the whole empire. Benevolent, wise, just all those good things.
He's got to be the poster child for perfect behavior.
Yep. High standards.
And a lot of pressure. Not only does he have to deal with heaven's mandate and keep all these powerful families happy, but he also has to be, like, a saint.
It wasn't a job for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
So did any of them just, like, crack under pressure?
Well, we don't have any, like, therapist notes from ancient Chinese emperors.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see in the historical record where some of them maybe didn't live up to those expectations.
I bet that didn't go over well.
Nope. And that could really undermine their legitimacy, make them vulnerable.
I guess that whole heaven's mandate thing could backfire, huh?
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword. It justifies your rule, but it also sets the bar really high.
Like, if you screw up, people might start thinking maybe heaven picked the wrong guy.
Exactly. Which is why those rituals were so important. It was a way for the emperor to be like, see, I'm still pious. I'm still connected to the divine. Everything's fine.
It's like a constant PR campaign.
Pretty much.
Okay, this is fascinating. But we've been talking a lot about emperors and all these powerful people. What about, like, everyone else, the everyday people?
Ah, yes. It's easy to get caught up in the world of palaces and power struggles.
Right. But what was life like for, like, a farmer or an artisan? Did all this stuff even matter to them?
That's a great question, and one that the paper actually addresses. We don't have a lot of direct sources from, like, everyday people back then.
No diaries from ancient farmers complaining about taxes.
Sadly, no. But based on what we do know, it seems like rituals weren't just for the elite. They were woven into the fabric of society at all levels.
So even in some tiny village miles away from the emperor and all the fancy palaces, people were still doing rituals.
Exactly.
So it's like those rituals, they weren't just a way to control people from the top down. They were also like a way for people to deal with all the crazy stuff that life throws at you.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Life in ancient China wasn't always easy,
Right. I mean, there's droughts, floods, famines, wars.
Exactly. And the paper argues that those rituals, they gave people a way to kind of cope with all that uncertainty and hardship.
Okay, I can kind of see that. But, like, give me a specific example. How would a ritual actually help someone, say, if their crops were failing?
Well, imagine you're a farmer in a village that's being hit by a terrible drought. You're desperate for rain, right? So you and everyone in the village come together and perform this elaborate rain ceremony. You're praying to the gods, you're making offerings, you're doing all these specific actions that are supposed to bring the rain.
Okay, so it's not just about, like, hoping for the best. It's about taking action, doing something.
Right. It's about coming together as a community, putting your faith in something bigger than yourself
Hmm.
and, yeah, hoping for the best. But it's also about that feeling of, doing something rather than just sitting around and waiting for disaster to strike.
So it's like a way of feeling less powerless in the face of, forces that are totally beyond your control.
You got it. And it's also about creating a sense of hope, right? Like, even if the rain doesn't come right away, the ritual itself can give people a sense that things might get better.
I guess it's kind of like a community support group, but with incense and chanting instead of, cookies and coffee.
Uh-huh. I like that analogy. But yeah, you're right. The paper emphasizes this idea that rituals, they helped people make sense of a world that could often feel chaotic and unpredictable. They provided a sense of order, meaning, and connection to something larger than themselves.
And that's something that people still need today, right? A sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense that there's something bigger than just our own little lives.
Absolutely. And it's amazing to think that those rituals, performed thousands of years ago, might have offered some of the same comfort and support that people find in, say, religion or community groups today.
It's like we're all connected across time and space by these basic human needs.
Wow, okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from emperors and palaces to like everyday life in ancient China. We've talked about heaven's mandate, bronze, rituals, family.
Hmm.
It's clear that power back then was a very complex thing.
Definitely not a simple subject.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm wondering, like, what can we learn from all this? Why should we even care about how ancient China functioned? That's the big question, isn't it? And I don't think there are any easy answers. But I do think that studying history, even ancient history, can give us some really valuable insights into how power works, even today.
Okay, so, like, what kind of insights? Give us something to think about as we go about our modern, non-emperor lives.
Well, for one thing, I think it reminds us that power is never just about, like, brute force. It's not just about armies and weapons. It's also about ideas, beliefs, symbols.
Right, like those rituals and the fancy bronze objects. They weren't just like pretty things, they were sending a message.
Exactly. And that message was all about legitimacy. It was about convincing people that the leader was worthy, that they deserved to be in charge. And that's something that's still relevant today, right?
Yeah, I mean, even in a democracy, leaders still need to convince people to vote for them. They need to seem trustworthy and competent.
Exactly. And they do that by using all sorts of symbols and messages, just like the ancient Chinese emperors did.
Mm.
Think about like political campaigns, speeches, slogans, even the way that politicians dress and present themselves.
It's like the ancient Chinese were the original masters of branding and PR.
Uh-huh. Yeah, in a way. They understood that to truly rule, you need to capture people's hearts and minds. You need to create a story that they believe in. And they did that through this incredibly elaborate system of rituals, family ties, and of course, the idea of the emperor as this divinely chosen leader.
It all comes back to that heaven's mandate.
It does. It's a powerful idea. And I think another big takeaway for me is how important rituals and traditions are for building a sense of community and social cohesion.
It's like those rituals, even if they seem kind of weird or outdated to us now, they were a way of bringing people together and reinforcing their shared values.
Exactly. And we still do that today, even if our rituals look different. Think about holidays, religious ceremonies, even sporting events. Those are all modern day rituals that serve a similar purpose. They bring people together, they create a sense of belonging, and they help to pass on cultural knowledge from one generation to the next.
So even though the specific rituals might change over time, the underlying human need for connection and belonging, that stays the same.
Exactly. And that's one of the most powerful things we can learn from studying history. It helps us to understand ourselves better, both as individuals and as a society.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think that people were dealing with a lot of the same stuff thousands of years ago, like they worried about power, leadership, meaning, belonging.
They did. And that's what makes history so fascinating, right? It's not just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding the human experience across time. It shows us that we're all part of a much bigger story than we often realize.
And that's a good thing, right? It means we're not alone in our struggles.
Exactly.
Oh.
And who knows, maybe by exploring the past, we can actually learn some valuable lessons that will help us navigate the challenges of the present and, build a better future.
Okay, that's a great note to end on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me. I feel like I've learned a ton, not just about ancient China, but about human nature in general. And to everyone listening, I want to leave you with this thought. What are the modern day equivalents of those things we talked about today? What are our heavens mandates, our bronze objects, our strategic marriages? How do we legitimize power and leadership in our own time? And what role do rituals and traditions play in our lives and our communities? It's something to think about, right? Because the past might be gone, but it's still shaping us in all sorts of ways. And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.